Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. My name is Niels Tudor Winter, and I have 13 years of experience working with EU R&D funding, and it is my quest to make a regularly running podcast on EU funding to help and support all of you sitting out there every single day working on proposals toward the EU Commission to get all this nice funding for the nice projects ideas that you are developing. So I have started this initiative with making what I am calling the timeline series. The timeline series meaning that I have started from scratch in the left end of the timeline, so to say, when you build up a proposal from the basic idea until the submission of the proposal. This is supposed to be generic episodes that anybody can always go back to and check for the different phases in the process towards submission. I might in the future add more episodes if I feel that something needs to be covered in more detail, or if requests by you listeners say we would actually like a little bit more detail on this aspect or this aspect. That's totally up to me, and I will do it if I feel the need to. Second, before I start today's subject, these are solo episodes, but I will have guests on board, not on a regular basis. I have chosen to make a concept of friends of the house, people that will be here on board regularly, covering different areas where they are specialists or have strong capacities to complement me. Because even though I've been working with this for 13 years, I have my key capacities, and some areas I'm a little bit more weak or have blanks where I need to have support from others that know much more than me around this. Now, that's that. Let's get going. It's gonna be a little content heavy in this episode because what we are going to cover today is reading the call text. So in the first episode in the timeline series, I covered the basic idea, how that comes about, and what you need to be aware of when you have that basic idea of whether you should approach EU funding. Second episode, it was about how to identify the funding. So how do you find the calls in the work programs? So that was the last episode. And now we have identified the call, and now we're going to read the call text. And the reason why I have made an episode specifically dedicated to this is because it's actually quite complex to read the call text, and it's good, especially for beginners, but anyone actually can listen to this. It's good to just have an overview of the structure and of how to read and interpret the text, and some tips and tricks on how to break it down so you can use it to make sure you cover what the Commission wants you to do. Now, I have 3 bullet points for this episode. First, I will go through the call text structure, so how the structure in each call is set up, the logic around that. Then I have a bullet around analyzing the call text, how to analyze the call text, how to read it. And then finally, key elements to be aware of when analyzing and interpreting the call text vis-a-vis the project idea that you have. And finally, as I have started off in this timeline series, I always have a segment in the end called The Toughest Challenge, where I carve out what is actually the toughest thing and how can you deal with that. Let's move straight at it. Call text structure. So this walkthrough is specifically related to Pillar 2 work programs. The Pillar 2 being the global challenges and European industrial competitiveness work programs. Because that's, as I mentioned in the last episode, that's where have my focus here in the beginning, also in these generic series. That might be widened out, but it's just to make it clear that those are the frame. That's the frame that I work within here, with the text that I analyze. That said, let's look at how such a call text look now. There's a title, of course, and the title, the first time you see it, it looks weird. So you have a text title at the end of the title, so to say. So you have that is the headline of what they want to do. So I've just taken an example here being, so this is the cluster 6 work program, the food, bioeconomy, natural resources, agriculture, and environment. It's a very long cluster title. Food, bioeconomy, natural resources, and agriculture and environment work program. This is related to plastic, so the headline is Innovative Solutions to Overpackaging and Single-Use Plastics and Related Microplastics Pollution. That's the title. But before that, you have some codes. And the logic around that is that these codes, you can always search for them throughout the participants portal, which is where you have all these things gathered online, all these codes gathered online. So this code is divided into different elements. So you have the word horizon, then you have dash, then it says CL6, which stands for cluster 6. Then you have the year, 2021. Then you have another abbreviation, CircBio, which stands for circular economy and bioeconomy. And then you have a 2-number code, 01-03. Now these things, so Horizon stands for Horizon Europe, CL6 stands for Cluster 6, 2021 stands for which year the call is open. CircBio refers to the subgroup of calls within Cluster 6 that this belongs to. So number 1 is referring to the batch, if it's the first batch, the second batch of calls under that round. And number 3 stands for which, in this batch of calls, which number it has under each batch. So this is complex, and actually to tell the truth, it took me some years to fully understand. I'm sometimes puzzled with some of them, but it's that's the logic behind. Now that's the headline. And this title you can always take it, copy paste it, and go and use it to find details in the participants portal. So the next thing you have in the code text structure is that you have the specific conditions. And specific conditions, it covers some of the formalities about how much budget and so on. So you have 4 things, and they're actually in a box, in a table, where you have 4 things. So the first thing is expected EU contribution per project, which is obvious. This is the amount of money that the Commission will give to each project. Then you have the indicative budget of the whole call. This means how much money have they allocated to this. So if this indicates how many projects they will fund for each call. So if you have, for instance, expected EU contribution per project 6 million, and indicative budget for the call is 12 million. This means that they will fund they will fund two proposals under this call. So it's an indication of how many projects will get funding from the individual call. Thirdly, you will have indication of type of action. And as I explained in the last episode, you have 3 different types of actions in the pillar 2. You have research and innovation action, you have innovation action, and you have coordination and support action. And as you might remember, the type of action is related to the rate of funding. So research and innovation action, everybody gets 100% funded. Innovation action, everybody gets 100% funding except private organizations. They get 70% funded. And finally, you have the coordination and support action, network projects, so to say. They get 100% funded. Finally, in the table, you have the technology readiness level. The technology readiness level is an indication of where the commission wants the technology to start, when the project starts, where they want it to be, and at which maturity stage they want the technology to be at the end of the project. So if it says technology readiness level 6 to 8, then you go into the technology readiness level overview, and those you can Google on the internet. There you have 9 levels going from basic research, stage 1, basic principles observed, stage 2, technology concept formulated, and so on, until technology demonstrated in relevant environment, for instance, level 6, or level 8, system complete and qualified. So this indicates the maturity of the technology. So the technology readiness level indicator here in the call text, it indicates at what maturity stage do the commission expect the technology to be, for them to expect it to have a certain level to solve the problem that they want to be solved, and where should it be when it exits, so to say, when the project ends. This is important. This is important because this is something that they discuss a lot in the fora, where they decide what should be in the call text, because it is related to how the technologies, how far the commission expects the technologies to be, which means when can you expect it to go to the market? How much slack should we give the research environment or the companies? How much slack time should they be giving to put into maturing this? Should we push them a little bit on the maturity level, and so on? So that's important. Now, after this, so you have the title, you have the specific condition that I just mentioned. Then comes the actual text, and here they start out with the expected outcome. And the expected outcome, that is, in short, this is what should come out of the projects. So it is what should come out concretely when you're finished. So what have you achieved? What is something that can be used afterwards from this project? I will come into detail this when analyzing the call text in a second. Finally, you have the scope, and here, this section, this is where the commission is telling you what you're supposed to do to reach the outcomes. And so that's pretty much that's the structure. That's how they made, and this is pretty much the same. This is the same throughout all Pillar 2 work programs. Title, specific conditions, expected outcome, and scope. So let's just move on to analyzing the call text itself. I will try to give concrete examples for you to understand, because since this is a podcast sound, I cannot show you, and it's complex to sit and read all the text out to give you examples, but I'm going to give some examples anyways, just for you to understand or get an idea of what it looks like. So let's just look. So when you analyze the call text, if we start with simply the specific conditions, as I mentioned, you have the contribution, you have the budget indications, and you have the funding indications, and the technology readiness level indications. Now, the most important thing here is not so much because I mentioned what to be aware of with the first 3 of them. So the technology readiness level, let me just repeat. This is something that is often, there's put a lot of effort or thought or discussions behind what levels they put into the work programs, because it reflects what they expect from the technology and from the sector, from the stakeholders, to put in of effort into reaching a certain level. So that should be respected. And when analyzing the text and analyzing the readiness level, technology readiness level, you should really try to stay within the readiness level, because you will sometimes run into issues where you see, okay, we will reach a higher technology readiness level with what we want to do. So let's just do that. How they shouldn't. How can that be a problem, that we reach further than what they want? But it can actually be a problem, because there is a logic to why they put it where they did. It might not play a role. I have tried both to keep within the readiness level, a maximum that has been set, but I've also tried to give it a notch up. I also make an effort often to ask NCPs or colleagues, knowledgeable colleagues, about what they think, what they advise, or what they would do, because it can play a big role in the end at the evaluation if you stick to the level that has been set, or if you go a little bit beyond or below. It's important to be aware of. Now, let's move on to the text itself. So let's start with the expected outcome. So for the expected outcome, what the Commission has done with the work programs since they changed to Horizon Europe, they made the destinations. The destinations are basically impacts. What the Commission has done is that they have made overall impacts for the full cluster work programs. In Horizon 2020, FP7, before that, you would have impacts being described for each specific impact wishes for each call, individual call. Here in Horizon Europe, they have lifted up and said, we want to define overall desired impacts for the whole bioeconomy area, so to say. So in the beginning of the work program document, you have these overall destination, as they call them, described. And in the fly-in in each individual call text, they refer to them. So they would say, just to give you an example from a concrete call text, the plastic one that I just started, it starts with, a successful proposal will contribute to all Destination 3 impacts related to consumers and industry. Blah, blah, blah. So here in the beginning, they refer to those overall destination impacts that they are defined in the beginning of the main document, the work package document. Here, for instance, they are broad. They're rather broad. So to give you an example, here they mention in particular to European industrial sustainability, competitiveness, and resource independence by lowering environmental footprint, enabling climate neutrality, and higher resource efficiency through increased circularity and a resulting reduction in GHG emissions. All this, it's broader. It's broad. It's overall. It's up on. It's up. Overall, it's a back curtain of everything here. So what they want with this call related to reducing plastic, they want it to be addressed within industrial sustainability, competitiveness, resource independence, environmental footprint, enabling climate neutrality, and so on. So these things need to, so your concept, your project idea should fit into this, should be able to step in and solve some of these issues, help pushing on the big train, so to say, with these big global challenges. That's the fly-in. So they kind of paint that's sort of the back curtain of what you need to refer to or answer to. Then the expected outcome text moves into what the project results are expected to contribute to. So they would normally have outcomes, and sometimes they will have the outcomes in bullets. In this concrete call text I sit with here with the plastic, you have 6 different outcomes, and then the Commission say project results are expected to contribute to at least 3 of the following outcomes. And this is a normal trick that they do. So this is probably to diversify and to give the environment, the stakeholders, some choice and some flexibility with the concepts they have, not to lock them in too much. In FP7 and FP6 in the old days, call text could be extremely specific, and there was a lot of criticism around that from stakeholder communities from a lot of sectors. So Commission has over the years started to soften these things to make it more accessible and flexible, But here, by doing it like this, they still define 6 different outcomes that they want to be touched upon, and then they say we need at least 3 of those 6 to be covered by each project that we are funding. And here, just to give you an example, what the text is like. So the outcomes, they sound like this, for instance: increase deployment and market uptake of innovation solutions through better design, alternative materials, business models promoting reuse, deposit systems, smart labeling. That's one bullet. Another bullet is increase reuse, recyclability and upcycling of packaging and single-use plastic, and so on and so forth. And these give it's very concrete what the Commission wants solved. And here then you need to make sure, of course, you cover 3. It's concrete. The text, it's text that both have so they sort of divided into 2. You have the fly-in of the broad outcome that it needs to contribute to the global challenge, and then you have very concrete, narrowed down to the specific issues of plastic overuse, or to zoom out for the specific problem of the concrete call text, narrow in, say this is what we need to solve, this is what we need to solve, and this is what we need to solve. Sometimes you have a list where the Commission say all 3 outcomes should be addressed. And sometimes they say one of the following. So it can be it's very diverse. It's up to each forum that sits and develop this text what they want, the decisions around it. As mentioned in the last episode, I will also make an episode on how these call texts, they are developed. So just for your curiosity. Now let's move on to the second text part, the scope. So the scope, as mentioned some minutes ago, scope is about how you are expected to do it, how the Commission expect you to solve the challenges that, how you're supposed to reach the outcomes that has just been mentioned. So here in the scope, this is about what is the problem. So what do we do? First they go. This is how they fly. The fly-in here is that the problem is described. What are we dealing with? In this case, in this concrete call text I sit with here on plastic, they describe that, just to give you a short text bite. So the amount of materials used for packaging is growing continuously, and in 2017, packaging waste in Europe reached a record 173 kilograms per inhabitant, the highest level ever. And then they start to go down to, in order to ensure that all packaging on the EU market is reusable and recyclable in an economically viable way by 2030, the essential requirements for packaging relate to reducing overpackaging and packaging waste and blah, blah, blah. So here you have the fly into the problem. You have what is the problem and what is the essential requirements that we need to deal with this problem. And then they narrow further in. Normally, it depends on the problem and challenge they're dealing with, how long this scope text is. Here, you have another paragraph where they move further into describing the problem. So they want several things handled here. So it's a plastic overpackaging, plastic, single-use plastic. It's of course a diverse problem. So they want some different elements and they describe them. And they need to go through what they need to go through shortly what the problem is that needs to be solved. So they continue in another paragraph on referring to the Circular Economy Action Plan, about environmental footprint, about microplastics, and so on. So when they have described the problem and the requirements of what we need to deal with, then they start to move on in the second half of the scope text. It's always like this. In the second part of the scope text, they describe how they expect the projects to deal and solve the problem. So here, for instance, to give you an example, They say projects shall combine at least 3 of the following elements: a reduction of over-packaging and packaging waste. 2, design for reuse and recyclability of packaging. 3, a reduction of material complexity, including the number of materials, and so on. So there are 6 here. Here again, you choose. Here again, you can choose. You only have to deal with 3 of these 6. But this is a description of what concrete action you need to take. Restriction of intentionally added microplastics, so increasing the uptake of alternatives, decreasing the dependency of fossil fuels and related pollution. So these are things where you have to cover them in your project concept of actual activity. Further on in this part, where they describe what you need to do to solve the problem, you also have the element of whether you're supposed to make demonstration activities, analysis activities, research activities, and so on. In this specific call text, projects should demonstrate at large scale and validate innovative solutions that are quantitatively relevant and replicable under diverse economic and social conditions. So here it is indicated that you need demonstration activities that show how to actually reduce the plastic overpackaging by design, by the reduction of the waste, by the restriction of microplastics, and so on. And then they even go further here. They say you can do this through better design, alternative materials, business models promoting reuse, recycling, upcycling, deposit systems, smart labeling, sensor-based sorting, etc. I will get back a little bit to the wording in a second. But here you have the outline of what they expect you, how they expect you to deal and work with the problem. Finally, in the last part of the description of what they expect you to do, you have more broader parts or horizontal parts that the Commission expects you to cover. So in this case, in this specific call, they want life cycle approaches, life cycle assessment of where you analyze the whole life cycle of your solution. They also want a systemic approach to value chains and end users, for instance. It can also be here, they describe that they want you to make business models or market analysis. And finally, in the variant, you have maybe even softer elements where they say we need consumer behavior covered or social innovation. You need to include in a social technological analysis. You need to deal with social change or new social practices and market uptake, something like that. This is how it's built up. This is the call text itself, how the wording is, how they are building it up. Now, when you analyze this text, how do you do that? How do you break this up? How do you get your head around it? So this is something that beginners, it can be a little rough because it's quite complex text actually. What I would say for the analysis, the best thing is to divide the text up, to work with the text, build your own bullets if you need to, make up the text, divide it into sections so you have a better overview of what the Commission is suggesting and what they really want, and the bullet points where you can choose, say, the things I just mentioned, 3 out of 6. And make all kinds of, mark the keywords, things you don't understand also. So make a structure of the text where you're sure that you understand what the Commission wants from you and from the projects. And then, when analyzing the text, you often have references to policy documents and other background papers. And they should be taken very seriously. It should be studied to make sure that you have the background knowledge that the Commission expects you to have, because it can be vital for shaping your concept into a winning one. And to tell the truth, I've been working with this for 13 years, and I have not always been that thorough when reading the call text, and I have not always read or dug into the policy document references, but time has taught me that this is important to do. Even if you and if you work together in the team, you need at least one person in the team that has a full understanding of what the reference to the background documents need, because there you will have sometimes very, very important indications of what you should the approach should be, a discourse that is expected from the commission on this problem. So I can only say this is how I do it now. So I mark up texts, I massage everything into, I actually copy paste from the PDF document into a Word document, so I can do whatever with the text I need to do to fully understand, with comment boxes, with color markings, with making my own bullets and so on, to make sure that everything is perfectly understood. I might not have remembered everything, but then I will get back to it in future episodes, I promise. I will move on to the key elements to be aware of when you analyze the call text. So I just mentioned a little bit here with the analysis, but let's just say that for the budget, of course, the indicated budget is, of course, very important for what you want to do, because if the indicated budget is much lower than what you expect from what you want to do, or what the partners you're together with expect to be able to carry out what you want to do, then you need to adjust your concept if you want to apply through that specific call. So the budget indicates, it's very important to understand and realize that if it fits what you want to do, and you should always be aware of the fact that you have the technology part. If you are a technology stakeholder, so to say, that with technology call, if you have technology, you have to have a budget for the technology part, but there are also elements in the project like communication, dissemination, you have the project management and so on. So you not just count on 6 million just for technology. So these things you need to make sure are understood when you start to work with a concrete call. Then there's the funding rate. If it's a research and innovation action, no problem, everything is funded. But if it's an innovation action, and if you're a private company, then you need to be aware of the 70% funding rate. So you need to mark up 30% from yourself. Now, all European, on Horizon Europe projects, you have an overhead in the funding of 25%. Now, overhead is sunk costs, so to say. So the commission, whenever they fund an organization from Horizon Europe, will say, this is your budget, but because you also have rent, you have your coffee machine, you have all the sunk costs that any organization have, we add 25% of your project budget to make sure that those things are covered in the project period. So for private companies, this means that you have a 70% funding rate, and then you get 25% on top of that. So that means that you get 87.5% covered in total. But so you're still short of up to 100%, which you need to be aware of. This it's just important that you don't think that it's not a surprise. Then, as mentioned, the technology readiness level is very important, because you can lose on the evaluation if you're not taking it seriously. So this should be an important discussion if there is an issue at all in the group of the partners about the technology, where it starts or where it ends. You need to make sure that you get those discussions in detail fixed, so you fit within what the commission wants. Then, if we zoom a little bit out on the text, on the wording, so to say. Now, it's important to be aware of the fact that all words in the call text, in the work programs, they have been through a very big machine. Really big machine. So you should read carefully the text, because nothing is by accident or just like this. Then we just write like this. I have myself been sitting in the program committees, working with developing texts for work programs, and I can reassure you that nothing is a coincidence. So any word in there has a meaning, so to say. It's like a good poem or a good book. it's nothing is by coincidence. So this means you cannot just dismiss something. They don't mean this so much. We don't have to pay that much attention to this. Yes, yes, you do, because it's there for a reason. And sometimes the texts have been the scenery of long and heated discussions in these fora. So interpretations of these texts, they can sometimes be very difficult, even for skilled people. As mentioned, I've been doing this for many years, and still, I can run into cold text where I think, what on earth do they mean? Are they meaning this or this? And I cannot get around this without checking with colleagues, or even checking with NCPs, or checking with the commission itself, to fully understand, what does this phrase mean? What do you mean by this? If you do European proposals on a regular basis, you should have run into this. And for beginners, you will run into it if you will do it on a regular basis in the future. So consult, if you can, by all means, with someone who can help you if something is not clear. Yes, and again, I just have to underline it. Don't dismiss elements from the text that as probably not important, because they are. I can reassure you, they are important. It's there for a reason. And sometimes the devil is in the detail. You might even have small things, little asterisks or little footnotes where you need to check out where that's a report that is referred to, and you need to check it. The policy document that I mentioned, don't just think, okay, that's a report. You have to read it. Go in there or have a colleague reading it to make sure that you understand what it is. Then there are the formulations themselves, the wordings. Now, modal verbs, by all means, those are, you should pay a lot of attention to how the modal verbs in the call text. Modal verbs are could, would, should, shall, and so on. Let me try to give you an example from the call text that I have giving examples from here. So if we look at the scope, where the commission writes what they expect, how they expect projects to attack the problem. So here, projects shall combine at least 3. Obviously, so you need to be aware of the shall. You have to, at least 3. You can also cover all 6 if you want, but at least you shall combine at least 3. What else? Yeah, here, projects should demonstrate at large scale. Same thing. If it should, indeed, you are going to have to make those demonstrations at large scale. And I suggest that you would make several demonstrators. Sometimes it says could. Sometimes you have could. Projects could choose this away, and then it's a choice you have. It's sort of a passive-aggressive suggestion if it says could, because that means that they actually would like to do, but they're not gonna. If you make something strong without doing that, then you could be funded, but it's a good indication of what you actually should do. Yeah, then you have more in the softer end of modal verbs here. So here in the end of the call text, on the social innovation, it says social innovation is recommended when the solution is at the social technical interface and requires social change. Blah, blah, blah. So here, if it's a social technical interface, so if there is a consumer related thing or social behavior and so on, then they say it is recommended. Doesn't mean that you have to, but it's recommended. Again, there is a sort of passive aggressiveness to that. So because when you are, especially when you've been working with this for many years, consultants like myself, like I am now, if it says it's recommended, then you do it. You incorporate it in the concept one way or the other. It's just like this. Because then you have your back covered for the evaluators. Because nobody wants to end up with a concept and beautiful evaluation, and then in the end you lose points on not having included social innovation, and then you don't get the project. So that's cover your back. I think that's the key elements to be aware. What I do myself with these things, I mark them. out. Actually, I color the words in the documents. I make a yellow color on them to make sure that I have it right, just with the important words, but also the modal verbs, to make sure that I know what is should, could, or is recommended. We are reaching the end of this episode. It was a long one. I knew it would be, because this is a tough area to deal with. The grand. Now, the toughest challenge. So let's look at the toughest challenge. So for the beginners, the toughest challenge is to get your head around this whole way of presenting cold text, from the commission side, and what to pay attention to, because there are so many holes to fall in if you don't understand fully how to interpret it. Also, simply how to read and understand the text itself can be challenging. And then, again, if you fit your own project idea up against the text you have identified, sometimes it fits perfect, and sometimes you need to massage or adjust the concept that you have. And that's a challenge, especially as a beginner, because you just want your project. You just want this project concept that your idea, the spark that I talk about, the enthusiasm that you have, that I talked about in the last episode. You want to keep that. You don't want it to be killed by all kinds of other things that the commission is forcing you into if you want the money from that pot. But sometimes it's a good idea to, especially if you're in a team, to get your head around how much it affects your original idea. And if you have a consultant, then they can shape it up, so you don't lose that enthusiasm. So the original concept idea is a red thread, with the other things built around that, so to say. So making your idea shining up, and making sure that that's the core of everything, and then you have these other elements that they're asking to make it roll. For the experience, the toughest challenge, I guess, the toughest challenge is when the structure of the work programs are changed. When you have been working, when you're experienced, and when you work with framework program like, say, the last Horizon 2020, you know it on the backbone when it's been running for some years. You know exactly how to read it, how to address it, how to build the project concept around it. But when you then move into, for instance, now they have moved into Horizon Europe, and they changed the structure of the cold text. So that also means you have to. What do they mean by this? What do they actually want? What are they seeking from us now in the way we build the proposals? And this is resource intensive to sit down and understand that. So it almost feels like you have to go back from scratch. It's not true, but the idea that you have to go back and then understand what do they mean with this, and what do they mean with this structure, for me to be able to correctly interpret the way they want the document made that we submit to them. So here I would say how to deal with these things. First and foremost, the commission is running info meetings, and those are strong info meetings, and they are info meetings / webinars that are recorded, that you can access afterwards, where they go through everything. So they can be quite long, but it can be beneficial to spend the time. Take the time and look through them, because they're always there, and they will answer many of the questions you will have on cold text structure, how to approach it, and so on, of the changes they made, what you need to be aware of. Often you will also have info meetings that are arranged by all kinds of organizations, associations, clusters, national ministries and agencies, and so on. So keep an eye out of that. Keep an eye out for that. Because they are good. Also, consultancy companies in general are making these things. Sometimes they cost money, sometimes not. But the point is that you have a lot of information out there, and you have a lot of organizations that do make events where you can ask questions and understand better how these things work. And finally, you have the NCPs, the national contact points for each country. And they are also supposed to help with this. So they are actually, their job is for you to be able to get in touch with them and ask for a specific call. And then you ask your question about what does this mean? And then it is their job to find out what it means and give you a reply to that. Finally, the commission itself. Actually, you can actually write the commission itself, the responsible departments that for the different work programs to understand. Then you need to go through the directory of the commission, and it's very rarely I do that. I normally use the NCPs or colleagues or the commission's own webinars to check. Now we reached the end. Next episode, I will cover idea development, concept development, and shaping the work package structure. And it falls in the timeline because when you have come at this stage, basic idea, you have identified the funding, you have read and understood the call text, then you have to start to shape up the whole project concept based on your core project idea. And that comes in the next part of the timeline. So that's next episode. Thanks for listening to the end. It's a pleasure to make these episodes. I'm looking forward to make more of them. I have created a website for this initiative. Check it out at thegrand.eu. Go and subscribe to this podcast and browse around to check out how the initiative is unfolding. When you subscribe, you will get access to the Grand LinkedIn group, which is where the interaction is going on between you, dear listeners, and me. Thanks for listening to the end, and looking so very much forward to build this up for you. Get the Grand! The Grand. You have been listening to The Grand, the EU funding podcast.